You have made it. You've made it your life's work to care for the hungry, for the houseless. And absolutely, that is exactly what this is talking about. That if you live out this way, that it is like a light rising in the gloom. And you are absolutely a light rising in the gloom. Thank you. Other thoughts? Who else had their hand up? Deborah.
Once again, life experience has reminded me that all the things we do, all the things that we're called to, all the things we experience, this started with here I am. Remember, here I am. I've never been away from you. It's just you haven't really focused on that too much. Here I am. We are in covenant together through all of this, through your despair, through your achieving, through your doing. You know, it is a covenant. You, me, the community, we're all in covenant in all of this. You're not alone.
Yes. God saying, here I am. Like we often talk about us as saying, here I am to God. But this is the person, the writer, crying out to God in despair. And God saying, here I am with you. Similar to the psalmist, right? As our call to worship, God is our refuge. So I think there's two things going on here. The need to receive refuge and the need to give refuge or provide refuge. And throughout, especially the Hebrew Bible, we hear people crying out to God to give them refuge, to be their strength, to be their source of life, right? And even in that Isaiah reading, there is this imagery of the stream or the fountain whose waters will never fail. It's a garden metaphor, right? And if we've here in Colorado been getting a lot of rain that we haven't had for a lot of years in this type of consistency, and I know that my garden is thankful for it, right? That there is a possibility of something that my roots can get down deep into, that I can feel like I'm connected to a source first. That's where this reading starts. And then there is conversation about how are we supposed to act once we have this experience of refuge. But it starts in spirituality. It starts in relationship. It starts as calling out to God, saying, I can't do this on my own. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. I'm tired. My leaves are wilty. There's no water in this stream bed that I've been sinking my roots into. I need a source of life that is perpetual. Something that I can tap into, a relationship I can have, a refuge I can flee to when everything gets to be too much. And holy Moses, is it too much right now? Everywhere you look, there is crushing violence, crushing injustice. And like Karima brought to us, it feels like it is too much for all of us to bear. We need refuge. This is where we start. This is what Sunday morning is. A bunch of us who have decided to follow this like wild guy named Jesus who had this idea of how the world should be. And we are out there operating on a countercultural level, saying that peace and justice can reign, that it doesn't have to be this way. And if we don't seek that refuge first, any hope or optimism we have for the future gets sucked up, dried out, like a stream bed in Colorado, like my throat. Excuse me. Thanks. And so we talk about how we live out in the world, right? But I think that that conversation has to have a paired conversation about how do we seek and find refuge. In many ways, the discourse about what it means to do social justice in this time and place, kind of outside of a faith context, and sometimes even inside a faith context, doesn't grant us the opportunity for rest. Anybody. We are battling these systems at all times, doing this without rest. That even a song that we've sung in this sanctuary, that we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. And yet, what are we commanded to do? Sink our roots deep into the refuge in God that we have been provided. And so I get curious about our faith life. What does our spiritual practices look like? How do we sink our roots deep? Do we seek out refuge? Or in many ways, do we feel like we don't need it? I've got enough to keep going. Anybody? No? No, me either, right? There's, even if I thought that I did, at some point you hit a wall, right? And so we are being encouraged to seek out refuge. This was a felt sense that people in the Hebrew Bible had in their faith life. Their lives were so marginal that God was the only protection that they had, that no one else was providing them refuge. They didn't have a lot of military might. They didn't have a lot of resources. So who was their refuge? Where was the only place they could turn? God. And in many ways, because of how we've set up our society, we get to forget that, many of us, right? We're pretty okay. We got what we need. Things are all right. Until they're not. Until there's a drought and our roots can't find anything to sustain us. So we're being invited into a relationship, a refuge, which consistently gives us what we need. Not wealth, not necessarily health, but a light in the gloom. Something that points the way to this can operate differently. So then we get to the Luke text. And obviously, the religious leaders at the time heard the command for Sabbath, that rest is important, that this time to not pursue your own ways is important. This time is set aside as holy. And in the Gospels, many times, especially in the Gospel of Mark, but not in the Gospel of Luke, when we talk about the spirit who is crushing someone or having someone bent over, we're not necessarily talking about actual like possession, or we're not talking about, we may be talking about an actual physical ailment, but often it is a metaphor. So what crushes women so hard that they are bent over for 18 years, basically the entirety of their adult lives? Harima.
Family responsibilities.
Family responsibilities. Yeah.
For children, cooking, all those things.
Yeah. Patriarchy, right? And if this woman is coming on the Sabbath to be healed, there's this expectation that she would come on these other 6 other days. But that may or may not have been accessible for her, which gives us an idea of how marginal her existence was, right? Especially if she has been in some way disabled for going on 2 decades. So she's being crushed by a system where she cannot access healing in any other way. And one of my friends asked this question, who actually needs to be healed in this Luke reading? Easy answer is the woman. Harder answer is the priests. They were so invested in the structure of how they had set up their lives, the system that was consistently keeping this woman away from healing, that when someone said, hey, this system is really jacked up, they freak out. And Jesus says, no, bring the person back. How many of us have been crushed by systems for the entirety of our adult lives, who have been crushed by systems meant to keep us away from access to healing? And the work of Jesus is to say, this system is not working. There is no healing to be found here in this way for this woman. And so he relieves her of the burden that she wasn't able to carry, and she is able to stand up straight beneath it. And I see this idea of refuge in this story. We have lots and lots of biblical accounts of Jesus going away, Jesus seeking silence, Jesus seeking the presence of God, and then coming back out to then dismantle systems of oppression. And that, I believe, is what we are called to do. To sink our roots deep into a source of life and a vision that then allows us to pay that refuge forward. To give an opportunity for someone to receive healing, to be seen, to stand up straight in a system hell-bent on keeping them bent over. This is the work of being Christian, I believe. To say to all of us, anything that deals you death, anything that keeps you bent over is not of God. But it's easy to let our roots get dried out. It's easy to forget that in the rat race. It's easy to lose sight of a vision of a world that does not operate this way. So we stay here for a while. We seek refuge. We pour out our grief. We are with one another. We are on each other's sides. And then we carry the possibility of a just world out of these doors. We pay the refuge we have found here forward to the next person seeking refuge, who needs it, who's being crushed by a system that does not want them to live fully. And in so doing, we will be repairers of the breach. What a beautiful gift to us. Repairers of the breach. Restorers of streets to live in. Isn't that necessary in Colorado Springs, where we are literally not allowing people to live in our streets, not much less our empty houses, where we have criminalized homelessness? So when we become the people who restore the streets to live in, who restore destruction to life, what an amazing charge we are given. Like Harima said, not alone. We've got God on our side. Still not alone, just us and God. We've got each other. It is overwhelming work in a death-dealing system. But you're not doing it alone, and 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 you're not doing it alone. We are doing it together. Rooted and grounded in a stream of life and refuge that we've found first. Our ancestors have known, and that we can bring out into a world deeply in need of healing. This is my prayer for all of us. Amen.